I think everyone knows now, hopefully that's listening to the show. Otherwise, I think it's time for me to retire. That over the next couple of weeks, it's very likely the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Do you think there's going to be any, are we going to see essentially Alito's brief and that's basically going to be it? There may be some fudging around the edge, but at this point, what's your sense of that?
I think that we'll basically see the draft a little bit cleaned up and a little bit toned down in some sections, specifically the parts that just openly castigate previous justices for supporting the right to choose. I imagine that won't sit well with Brett Kavanaugh. But other than that, it's going to be all about toning it down rhetorically, about making it more aesthetically appealing. I don't think there's going to be any substantive changes to the draft because, again, Alito had those votes locked in February, and they must have known more or less what Alito was going to say. The conservative legal movement has been writing a version of that draft for almost 50 years now. Nothing in it surprised me even a little bit. So I think that if Barrett and Kavanaugh have real qualms with it, they'll write some separate opinion trying to make themselves seem like the good guy. But I think we're going to get a decision that looks very, very similar, if not identical, to the draft we all saw in May.
All right. And I don't, obviously not minimizing the implications of essentially allowing, half the states in this country more to outlaw abortion. But it also, that brief also mentioned Griswold. It also mentioned the Texas case where the Supreme Court said you cannot pass laws against sodomy. And he referenced, he analogized those decisions in many respects to Roe v. Wade, in that there were sort of rights in the Constitution that were sort of made up. That becomes, even if Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett or whomever write something like, I'm not on board with that, but that becomes part of the canon, doesn't it? And we're going to see maybe the Fifth Circuit cite that dicta, essentially, in the brief, in some case, maybe a year or 2 years from now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is dicta, which means it's not formally part of the holding, but it is another signal to lower courts about which direction SCOTUS is moving in, and a kind of encouragement, a kind of wink and a nod to those lower courts to start shifting in that direction. And, the lower courts have all of these tools at their disposal to kind of force issues to the Supreme Court. And so all the Fifth Circuit has to do is uphold a sodomy ban or a same-sex marriage ban or a ban on IUDs or whatever. And that essentially forces the issue to SCOTUS. And so, if those passages remain, and I do think that it could be one of the places where the rhetoric gets toned down a bit. But if those passages remain, you will absolutely start seeing litigation in the lower courts, specifically conservative and Republican courts, trying to roll back these other precedents, protecting rights to personal autonomy. Because Alito's line is, well, the idea of personal autonomy doesn't make any sense as a legal concept, because if it were true that you have a right to control your body, then you'd have a right to do drugs and engage in sex work. And that's obviously not true. So how could you possibly have a right to engage in sodomy?
And we should say there are, and this happens on the nominal left to some extent, not with the same, I think, efficiency that it happens on the right. But there are organizations dedicated out there to waiting for that dicta and saying, okay, let's go find a plaintiff here and let's push this case so that we can go to these places and do that. And that's what we're going to see. And I also have a prediction that if he doesn't mention Griswold in the final product, if we don't see Griswold, we don't see that Texas case, some court is going to cite the leaked brief and say this is what they were thinking on some level there anyways.
I mean, multiple Republican judges literally cited a tweet that Ron Klain retweeted from an MSNBC anchor as proof that the vaccine mandate was illegitimate. And so I don't think that what you're describing or predicting is at all unreasonable. I think it's probably a safe bet that that will indeed occur.